And I think it's helpful for parents. Again, it's not morbid, but it's recognizing that your kid is going to have a judgment, and they're going to be judged. How are you preparing them now for that moment? It's not a question of if it happens. Your kid is going to be judged. And those 6 reasons for fear is really there. What are you going to do, mom and dad, today to prepare that kid for that judgment in 50 years, 70 years, 100 years? It's going to happen. And how are you preparing them today?
Welcome to the Conor Gallagher Show. We explore topics of substance from raising kids to spiritual warfare. This isn't just a show, at least for me. It's an ongoing journey of our second conversion. Life is short and eternity is really, really long, and there's no time to waste on trivialities. Let's dive into the essence of what truly matters, and let's do so right now.
So good news for anybody who has kids. We're going to reverse engineer parenting today.
Okay.
Start from the back
Yeah.
and work our way forwards.
Well, that's what any competent person does pretty much in any endeavor in their life. You know, they start with a vision statement in business where they're trying to say, okay, this is why we exist. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And then they work backwards. Visualization, like professional athletes, you know, they envision the ball going. And there was a great study, I think it's fairly well known, where the psychologist took a bunch of people who had never shot in a basketball in their entire life.
Where do they find these people, by the way?
Exactly. Who hasn't shot a basketball? Maybe they're all from Europe. I don't know.
Definitely not from North Carolina.
Asia. I mean, they're Asians. I have no idea. So, but who else doesn't play basketball? I don't know. The Australians? I don't know. Just throw everybody in there. I'm not picking on Asians. I'm just saying, I don't know. They probably don't play a lot of basketball. But all these people, no one had ever shot a ball, right? And they had half the group sit there and visualize with their eyes closed the ball going in the hoop from the foul line. And they just kept visualizing. And the other people they just hand the ball to. And the people that visualized before ever touching the ball, they scored like 3 times, 4 times as many baskets as everyone else. And so visualization works. Like, we know that. In fact, I'm having Dr. Bill Thierfelder come on the show, and he's a sports psychologist. That was his doctorate, really, is in sports psychology. And I'm fascinated in the subject because that's just the most tangible, practical way where you can see these professional athletes that he would work with. What he's a master at is getting them to envision their performance. He would work with wide receivers, and they would envision which finger is touching the ball first when they catch the ball. Can you imagine that? Like, that level of precision. So he has many, many stories about people doing nearly superhuman feats, and it's always involving because they're able to envision something. And so shouldn't we be doing that with our kids? I mean, I truly believe that if we really thought about our kids 1 trillion years from today, and what their outcome is, we would behave differently today. We are way too stuck in the moment, and we need to be thinking about the eternal consequence, the eternal destination of our kids, which is part of the reason why I wrote Parenting for Eternity. But yeah, you start with the end in mind.
So
absolutely.
Is that how you started the book?
I don't remember.
It's been a while, huh?
Yeah. But I mean, I think the way I start is
I mean formulating the book.
How I came up with the idea for the book?
Yeah.
I think I realized very quickly in my parenting journey, having 16 kids, you know, somewhere earlier on, and being the publisher of TAN. I mean, come on, like if you don't, I shouldn't get any credit for this because I spend most of my career dealing with things of eternal consequence because of the books we publish. I mean, I publish books about heaven, about hell, about how to get there, how to avoid getting there, about purgatory. We publish books about saints who have come back from the dead and communicate what it's like. We publish books about saints who have visions of hell and what that's like. I mean, right here on the desk, which we'll talk about later, one book is called The Glories of Heaven. It's by St. Anselm, and it's what the glorified body is going to be like. And this book here is by Thomas à Kempis, and it's called Meditations on Death, and it's his kind of visualization of this dude on his deathbed. thinking about how have I lived my life. So if the publisher of Tan doesn't think about things of eternal consequence, then someone should take them out back and shoot them, right? I mean, that's just, so I can't take a lot of credit for thinking about things of eternal consequence, because it's what I'm paid to do. It's what my whole life is focused on. So having a bunch of kids at home, it's logical for me to say, wait a minute, what is the eternal consequence of my kids? And that's a blessing that I've received, to be able to spend time with all these kinds of titles and books and saints and concepts. And then I go home and we're doing the dishes and we're doing homework and we're yard work and just all the changing diapers.
Cleaning up some sickness.
We were just talking
recently.
about 2 weeks straight of one kid throwing up after another. It was just remarkable. But so, I've tried to be intentional about, actually, I mean, this is totally true, Tim. Like, maybe this is weird, but when my kids are barfing, and they have just been barfing for 2 weeks, right? I try to tell them, what are you offering this up for? What are you sacrificing this for? I mean, even the little guys are able to understand this, and my wife knows this lady who's a mother with a bunch of little kids, and she's got cancer. And so, she's been saying that name at our nightly rosary. But when the kids start puking, we don't waste it. And I tell them, don't waste this. Like my 15-year-old son was, the image is just, in my mind. Little kid comes down and said, Paul's throwing up, because everybody's taking turns throwing up. And I go up, and Paul's sitting on the edge of his tub, the shower tub, just kind of like hovering over the toilet. He's just sitting there. And I just walk in, how you doing, son? He's like, I'm okay. I'm like, well, son, it's 9:00 at night. The good news is it'll be done before the sun comes up, because we knew the timing. These bugs have timings, right?
Sure.
It'll be done before then, but you're not going to sleep tonight. If you do, it's going to be little naps. You're going to throw up every 20 or 30 minutes for 3 or 4 hours, and then it'll space itself out for another, hour or two until the morning, and then you'll sleep all day tomorrow. But tonight is going to be miserable. Don't waste it, son. Don't waste it. Find something to offer this up for. That's what the Christian life is about, is learning how to have redemptive suffering. You can either suffer tonight and just waste it and just suffer like everyone else, like a pagan. Or you can figure out how to unite this somehow with some kind of mystical purpose and make it real, make it count. And he's like, oh, okay. I'm like, all right, love you, son. Let me know if you need anything. You want some Gatorade? It's just like, what else do you do? But that's what parenting for eternity really is. Don't waste it. Don't waste your suffering. Now I was the first one to have it in the house. So when I started feeling sick, I left the room, shut the door, and then I just went to the bathroom out in the main house so that I wasn't waking up Ashley all night long. I basically just lived in that bathroom. I can't believe we're talking about this, but I mean, it's just, everyone gets stomach bugs. It's just the reality of it, right?
Right.
But I'm sitting here sick as hell and just thinking, this time the clock is going so slow, And I'm just like, how do I make this some kind of redemptive suffering? How do I do that? I talk about it, you stupid hypocrite, you idiot hypocrite. You talk about, I got a little book called You Have Only One Problem. I'm just kind of letting you in, like little vulnerability here. But I mean, I wrote that book, You Have Only One Problem. And I've been doing like some PR and publicity on it. And I'm going around preaching, saying, look, suffering is not necessarily a problem. Sufferings are divine remedies given to you by the divine physician. It's a remedy prescribed by the divine physician to heal your soul. That's why you're suffering. It's not necessarily a problem, because it doesn't necessarily have to be solved. The only thing that has to be solved is my trustful surrender to that divine providence. So if I have a suffering, stop saying that I have a problem. And so, Tim, I'm not kidding. Like, I go around preaching this stuff, and it's the 12-inch transfer, like from the head to the heart. Like, that's where it gets real. And I'm sitting here throwing up in the bathroom, and I'm telling myself, like, literally out loud during my dry heaving episodes. And I'm saying, this is not a problem. It's just a suffering. This is not a problem. It is a suffering. It sounds crazy. Like, if you had walked by, you'd be like, that man's insane. But I was trying so flippin' hard to make all my theories and my little books real. Like I'm trying to make it real. Otherwise it's just stupid writing and it should be burned, you know? And you should delete every time I've ever done an interview if I don't try to actually live it. This is not, and it was not a problem. It was a divine remedy in the form of a little stomach bug to bring Conor to his knees so I would learn to suffer a little bit better. And then to have to be patient and help my family get through the suffering and then to show them how to suffer. Like that stomach bug that just was the Gallagher weight loss program. Right. I lost 5 pounds. It was great, you know? It was a spiritual weight loss program. It was time to burn away some spiritual, gluttonous, prideful fat. That's what it was. It was a divine remedy prescribed by the divine physician for the Gallagher family to get a little holier. That's what it was. It's not a problem. It was a blessing in the form of suffering.
And you mentioned this in the book, like you have the quote, I fail horrifically at many of the precepts in this work.
Yeah.
So taking it from the words and putting it into reality. And you mentioned like that's why you write a lot of these things, right?
Yeah, I'm writing it to try to convince myself to go do it. That's why I keep writing these things. And I always joke whenever I'm giving a talk anywhere. I did it the other day at the men's conference in Charlotte. And it's like, all right, guys, if you like this book, then please be sure to buy my next one, which is on hypocrisy, because I am a world-class expert. You know, it's just my little joke. But yeah, I mean, this particular book, Parenting for Eternity, it's not a how-to book. It's really not at all. It's not how to parent. It's a why book. It's why do you parent? Why do you pray the rosary with your kids? Why do you lead them in the devotions of the church? Why do you try to get them to live the liturgical calendar? Why do you need to sometimes sit down and think about the eternal destination of your kids? Why do you try to encourage them to suffer well? Like there's a chapter in here, I think it's called The School of Jesus Christ Crucified. Well, that's what we just went through, the stomach bug. It's the school we homeschool and the School of Jesus Christ Crucified. That's what Christianity is about. I mean, so yeah, I write these things trying to live it, man. And I fail every day. But what are you going to do? Because you fail, you're just going to stop talking about it? Well, then we wouldn't have any priests or ministers or preachers or evangelists, or we wouldn't have any apostles. You know, I'm glad that their horrific shortcomings did not prevent them from going out to all corners of the earth and baptizing all nations. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be sitting here. So,
do you think if more parents thought about parenting for eternity, we would have more or less kids in the world? You're talking about reverse engineering.
Far more. That's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it like that. But I
mean, the idea that you can continue to get eternal souls into heaven.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And actually, I think like our Mormon brethren and like other denominations, they got some messed up theology, but they have a very clear sense of heaven and of like a paradise that they'll live there, and that earth is just a means to that end. Like they have a real good sense of that. So they have a lot of kids. So I think one of the things I say in here is I want you to think about the last time you learned that your spouse was pregnant, or that if you're a woman that you were pregnant. And what was your reaction? Was it, oh my gosh, I don't have the money for this. Oh man, not again. Was it start doing the math of plus 18 or 22 when they get to college or they're out of college, I'll be how old, you know? And I'm starting to do that math, you know. You're a little older than me, so the last time your wife got pregnant, how old's your youngest?
He is 4.5, so she was 43.
Yeah, and you were how old?
43.
Yeah, you were 43.
Old man.
Yeah, so you start saying plus 18, plus
right.
20, whatever, and you start saying, how old am I? I'm going to be an old man, you know. So, you know, we think about those things, and the world has some. I get really angry about these news reports that have been going around recently about how much it costs to raise a family. it's absurd. What they come up with is completely absurd. And the end result is that if you don't make $200,000 a year, you can't have 4 kids. So it's just bunk. It's just nonsense. But I think that's part of an agenda to like have less kids, because the overpopulation and agenda in this world it's a real thing. That's a real thing. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah,
the founder of Planned Parenthood was a serious population control nut job. I think the far left is very serious into that. Bill Gates is very serious into that.
Sure, go to China and other places too. Yeah, but I think the narrative now is pushing back on it. Like J.D. Vance is very clear in pushing back on it. And, but I've never thought of that either until I just asked you the question when you talked about it. You know, the idea of parenting for eternity, would that encourage more people to have kids? I think, how could it not?
Because if you think like, what was the response that you had the last time you learned that your spouse was pregnant? Did it sink in? Did it register? This is an eternal soul was just created, and they're going to be here in 10 trillion years. Like, and if we process that the right way, Tim, we would as a nation have a lot more children for sure.
Hey, thanks guys for checking out the Conor Gallagher Show. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, or comment, or whatever you got to do to support it. And I appreciate that very much.
So help us do that, right? You start with a couple of different examples. What just popped up in my head then to help me do that is the Canticle of Simeon there. I think I just heard this at Mass the other day, I think, and how when Jesus is presented, he's like, all right, you can take me now. I'm good to go, basically.
Yeah, I think that, when he says, now let your servant go in peace, your word has been fulfilled. That should be kind of the prayer of each parent after we've raised our kids properly. It's like, okay, we're willing to present our child to God, and our job is done, and we can go in peace, But I don't think that's usually what happens. I think parents, I don't think parents think about, I think sometimes we think about our own judgment, But part of this, what I tried to do here in the introduction and then in the 4 last things, is get parents, and this is a simple little trick, but get parents to think about your kids' judgment. So, let's hope and pray you die before your kids do, right? And then I think that means you're going to witness your child's judgment. And you're going to be sitting there thinking, well, I mean, we'll get to that in maybe judgment. We're out of order a little bit, but I think that ultimately, when we're on our deathbed, you and me, we can look at our family surrounding us and have a happy death and say, let your servant go in peace, because we kind of did what we were supposed to do as husbands and fathers. Yeah. We had, again, that's thinking about the end in mind. Like, how do you want to die? What do you want on your tombstone? And that's just the beginning of the end. Go forward 10 trillion years, and now you've got something interesting to think about.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the eternity aspect of this is crazy to me. So you mentioned that you're doing this to remind yourself, and you're falling short all the time, like all of us do as parents in so many ways. But the idea of not being completely focused on today or tomorrow or the moment and zooming out for eternity. Do you have a trick we can do? Like what flipped in your brain when you're sick in the bathroom, as opposed to this is awful in this moment, to say, no, this is just something I've been given right now, and offer it up?
I think it's a little counterintuitive. So look at your little child. If you got a little child, you look at these little legs, these little hands, these little feet, these little eyes, the little lips, the little ears, this adorable little creatures, right? I mean, the little kids are just adorable. It's the same stupid reason people like puppies. They're just cute, and we would do anything for their bodies, anything, and I can remember years ago when actually the same 15-year-old, but when he was 2, he broke his femur and upstairs in one of the kids' bedroom, and he ends up coming down, somebody carried him downstairs, I get him, and I'm just watching his femur just explode and swelling. And so we Literally got the ironing board, threw him under like a stretcher, put him in the back of the car. You can die from a broken femur. And I'm taking him to the ER because I can get to them faster than get to me. And then, so he's a little guy. He's in the ER all night. They put him in an ambulance, take him to St. Jude's, not St. Jude's, Levine's Children's Hospital downtown Charlotte. And I have to sit there in the room with him all night. Ashley went home with a new baby. And so I'm there all night long with this little kid who is too young to remember to stay still, stop wiggling. Every time you wiggle, it's excruciating pain. Mm. And every time the nurse would come in, it would wake him back up and he would jolt and he would be in agony all over again. All night long. I didn't sleep a wink. And I remember thinking so clearly, I'd do anything for this little kid's leg. Like, if you could just snap my leg, just snap it like a twig to save his pain tonight, I'll take it. I'll do it right now. No thinking, no fear, just do it. Snap my leg to heal his leg, right? I think a lot of parents would do that. So we would do anything. If your kid was dying of cancer, you would panhandle if you had to get treatment. You would have 3 jobs. You would sell everything you have. You do all of these things for the body so what I'm saying is it's counterintuitive. You look at the body and it's just this adorable, precious little thing that you would do anything for. And we do everything for. Like, take them to the dentist. You help them play sports. You take them to the doctor. You just care for them. You do all of these things.
The food these days you buy, right?
Everything we do is to take care of this little body. And so the listeners kind of know where I'm going, but maybe not, right? Because they know I'm going to go and say, but take care of the soul. Yes, but the reason you take care of the soul is so that same body is glorified one day. So it's a little like, look at this precious little body you're going to do everything for, but don't dismiss that body. That body is sacred. There is a reason to take care of it. Now, the way you protect that body for eternity is by taking care of the soul now. And that, I think people miss that part. There's a heresy that basically says, like Manichaeist, back Augustine was dealing with it in 400, that the body doesn't matter. Well, it does. It absolutely does, because that body is going to be for eternity in either heaven or hell. That body will resurrect and it will join the soul in heaven or hell. A lot of people don't think about that. We think about the glorified body in heaven. We don't think about the resurrected body in hell. And if you go to hell and then 1,000 years later your body joins you, that's when the real party begins. That's when you really start suffering. It's even worse than just the spiritual suffering that you have in the meantime. If you love that little body, take care of the soul so that the body is taken care of for all eternity. It's a little counterintuitive.
For sure. Which is, like you mentioned, you kind of start at the end. It's a bit reverse engineering parenting. You start parenting for eternity with the 4 last things.
Yeah.
Death, judgment, hell, and heaven.
Yeah.
And you have a tough, I think, way to introduce this by, like what you just said, like, imagine if your child had cancer, like that massive shift in your life. And if you know anyone who's had to go through such an ordeal or, something similar, you've probably seen it to some degree anyway, how one thing can snap your entire life into a different directions.
Yeah.
So with that, the thinking of the death of your child is really difficult for a parent.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's every parent's worst nightmare. We know somebody whose child died right here in this building, and it's like the worst thing you can ever imagine. Probably everyone out there listening knows somebody that lost a child way too early. It's a completely unnatural thing. Well, welcome to earth with the problem of sin. This is what original sin all is. I mean, one of the results of original sin is sometimes parents outlive their children. I mean, it's terrible. It's like the worst, right? So why in the world would a parent, why am I telling parents to actually contemplate their child's death when it's the worst thing that a parent could ever undergo is seeing their young child die? Like, that's the worst. That's the worst, right? By the way, it's also, if you truly have embraced the Christian faith, and it happened with the guy who we know here, you can also see that the death of a child, it becomes a catapult, a catalyst for an incredible deepening of the faith, because it's so tragic. It's either an opportunity to really lose your faith, which a lot of people do. And by the way, like, the death of a child is like the single biggest indicator that a couple will get divorced. Right. I mean, statistically, your kid dies, you're going to get divorced. It's awful. That shows the pain associated with it. But it can also be this thing that like catapults people into a whole nother, the stratosphere of holiness. I mean, and that's what, our friend here went through. I mean, he just became just a holier man, just basically overnight. It was remarkable. It's miraculous. That kind of thing is miraculous when people lose a child and they become even better for it. And that's just the proof of divine providence. But so I am saying that it's counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive that parents must prepare their children for death. Like, that sounds morbid. And, I got one review. The reviews of this book have been glowing, outstanding. People really love it. But I got one review, which we've talked about before, that this lady tanked me, basically saying that I'm morbid and she would hate to see how my kids have been raised, like fearing death and hell. I'm like, what are you talking about? If you were in my house for 10 minutes, you would see that there is nothing morose about my home. It's a lively, vibrant thing. But do you not warn your teenage daughter to not go down alleyways, right? Do you not warn your son to stay away from gangs or dangerous people on the internet? I mean, of course you do. And so you need to talk about death, because guess what? They're gonna die. And like I tell, in almost a joking way, I tell my kids all the way, not a joke, it's not a joke, but in a jovial way, I'll say, hey guys, don't forget, you're gonna die someday. And you have to be desensitized to that a little bit. Like, I talk about that with my kids, even little kids, and it's not like this impending fear. The leaves on the tree died. The dog died. We had chickens that died. We had 2 goats that died. I mean, everything died. Grandma dies. Grandpa dies. Little kids see these things. Death is all around. Death is everywhere. It's unbelievable. Everything you're eating has died. I mean, in some way or form, it's everywhere. So parents, you got to talk to your kids about death so that they're prepared. Because death is, in many respects, Tim, an absolutely terrifying thing. And in other ways, it should not be. Now, in the modern world, I think people are terrified of death for the wrong reason. They're terrified of death because they don't want to let go of this life. There's actually an unhealthy addiction right now, especially with rich people, to the notion of longevity. Can I live 120 years, 150 years? It's going to happen. I mean, it is happening. But they're still going to die at some point. It's just a matter of when. So, but what I'm saying is there is a reason to have a healthy fear of death. And it's something that a lot of people might not think about. You want to talk about that now?
Sure.
So something that I've learned from reading the church fathers, St. Gregory the Great, Augustine, some other people, they have stories. Bernard of Clairvaux, something I came across recently. I've been addicted to him recently. These church fathers have stories about near-death experiences, or when dead people have like communicated back with them. In today's world, and they have a different take on what the death experience is like. In today's world, we hear a lot about these near-death experiences. People go towards the light. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does happen. In fact, we're going to be talking to a guy named Paul Zuccarelli very soon. His episode may even come out before this. I don't know. But he was dead for 22 minutes or something. And he had this incredible experience of seeing heaven, to some extent. And we're going to learn more about that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that doesn't always happen. And something that we don't often hear about, Tim, is what the church fathers talked about, which there is a terrifying event at death, because the soul is separating from the body. That's a real thing. You see, the result of sin is death, and death is the separation of body and soul. So I like to think about, I don't like to think about it, but I do think about death in the sense of similar to a notion called white torture. And there's something called white torture that particularly, you can like Google it and you see the Wikipedia page on it. And Iran, of all countries, kind of perfected this. It's their torture of choice. There's been some famous journalists that kind of went through this. So white torture, as in the color white, a white room. They take somebody, they put them in a room where every single thing is perfectly white, to where they don't have perspective anymore. And, I've been in a studio where there's called an infinity wall, where there's no angles to the floor and the wall. And it's very disconcerting because when you're looking at it, there is no angle to give you perspective. So you don't know if you're 6 inches away from the wall or 6 feet away from the wall. It's like being blind. You have to put your hand out and you realize there's nothing there, or it's right in your face. It's very strange.
I think carnivals will do that to some degree if you go
Sure.
in the silly mirror place. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's just one of these things where you don't know what's happening. Well, white torture is similar to that. And yet you put somebody in white clothes, white shoes, and it's perfectly silent, right? You have perfect silence. Even the guards have cushiony shoes or something to where they can't hear the guards. And over time, the person who's locked up in that solitary confinement in the white room, they go crazy. They absolutely lose their mind because they have sensory deprivation. They don't hear anything. They essentially don't see anything. And they end up having a phenomenon. I forget the exact term, but it's something like depersonalization psychosis or something, where they end up, it's almost like their soul separates from their body, and they have the illusion of hovering over their own body, looking at their body crumpled up on the floor. Like, that sounds like death, because death is the separation of the body and soul. And so the church fathers, going back to what I was saying about them, Gregory the Great, other people, they talk about at the moment of death, and all of a sudden you're conscious of the universe. You're conscious of yourself. You're conscious of things around you, but not by your sight, by your hearing, by your touch, by your taste, by your smell. You've lost all those senses. I mean, you've heard that sensory deprivation is a form of torture, like where they blindfold you, they mute you, they even make you, put you in water and let you float there. They cover your ears. People go crazy. You don't have any idea. By the way, if that was to ever happen, one way to keep a perspective on time is just pray a rosary and figure it's about 15 minutes. Pray it nice and slow, 15 minutes. That's how you keep your mind. Not that you're planning on getting stuck in white room or sensory deprivation.
Wait a second. What's happening after the podcast?
Right. But
I didn't sign up for that.
But I mean, don't just sit there and like not do anything, because you completely lose perspective, which might tell you if you die, if you're in a habit of just starting to pray the rosary, that might give you, it tethers you to reality and to time to a certain extent, right? Because it's about 15 minutes, right? My point is that at death, there is a torture. Some theologians have speculated that at the moment Christ on the cross, when he cried out, it was right at the moment of his death, he cried out in agony, was that his soul separating from his body, and he was experiencing that result of sin, and it was his spirit being disconnected with his body, and there's pain associated with that because it's extraordinary sensory deprivation. I'm not saying that that's what happened with Christ. I have read that by saints who speculated on that. So I'm not sure at all that the typical or everyday experience of death is going to be hovering towards the white light. It might be more like the white torture. It might be more like the sensory deprivation, and it can be absolutely terrifying. Now, I've told like my dad that, I've told some other older people that, and it's scary, but I'm saying, so when it happens, you might remember that. Now, a couple things, tying this back to your children, right? If we train our children in mortification, slowly developing a sense of how do we kind of disconnect our reliance on the senses. That's what mortification and penance do over time. You kind of die to self. We call it white martyrdom. If you do that slowly over time, you become more and more accustomed to bodily discomfort, to relying on something other than your senses. Saints do this. So I'm saying as parents, we need to prepare our kids for death. And part of that is talking about death. But part of it is encouraging to start living a life of mortification and penance. That's the Christian way. That is the Christian way. We have to raise little martyrs who are willing and able to die to self and for the faith. Perhaps even one day that could come. I think it probably will. So that when they die, this separation from their body is not as shocking. But they say, okay, I know how to live apart from my body. I have been mortifying myself for this. And there's other ways to prepare your kids for death, but we could talk about the Rosary here in a second if you want. But
sure,
I think that sensory deprivation is just an interesting way to connect something that happens in real life, in real torture, with what I'm afraid might be the situation that we experience at death. And don't assume that it's just the white light. Sometimes that happens. I believe people that say that, but I don't think that's the case all the time.
Tan Books is here to help you become a saint. That's why we do everything we do. We publish thousands of titles, literally, that are specifically written to help you get to heaven. Everything from the lives of the saints to the writings of the saints, the greatest doctors of the church, the great spiritual masters, Alphonsus Liguori, St. Francis de Sales, and so on. So please come to tanbooks.com and find the book that God wants you to have right now so that you can get to heaven and be a saint for eternity.
Giving your kids the tools to deal with things is what parenting is, in my mind. If you break it down, if you're trying to be a good parent, you're trying to give them some tools.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you can do that as well as preparing for eternity.
Yeah. One
way to do that, you mentioned the Rosary, if you had sensory deprivation, but not just with that. What about just in everyday life, how that is a weapon in death?
If you're going to prepare your kids for death, I think the single greatest way to do it is to habituate them to praying the Rosary every single day. So I have this math for praying the Rosary, and I can't remember what page it's on. It's early in the book.
Got it. If a 10-year-old prayed a Rosary every day until age 80?
But I wanted to tell you all the math. Yeah, I see that summary point, but
so I got the math. So how
here
many
it is.
Hail Marys in a Rosary?
I got it right
53,
here.
right?
Yeah, so there's 53 Hail Marys in every single Rosary. 365 days a year. So that's 19,345 Hail Marys
per year.
If your kid's 10 and does this till statistically they die to 80, that's for 70 years. That's 1,354,150 times. Now, if you ask the Blessed Virgin Mary to pray for you now and at the hour of your death, if you ask her that 1.3 million times, if for no other reason than relenting to your pestering, she will comply. And why do you need the Blessed Mother at the moment of your death? Let me tell you. Because the saints have been clear. Again, at death, there's a lot of things that happen. And one of them is like right before you die, right before your soul separates from your body. There's a lot of stories throughout the tradition of the demons attacking you and tempting you. They got one last chance to tempt you away from God. Now, what are they going to do? If you're an old man dying in bed, what are they going to do? Tempt you to lust at the last second? No. What are they going to tempt you to gluttony at the last second? You probably can't even eat anyway. You're probably on a feeding tube. Like, what are they going to tempt you to at the last second? Despair. And how do they do that? I've read the saints say, not Conor, the saints say, they will take all the sins of your life that they have access to and rush them through your mind to where they want you to say, oh my gosh, I am a complete worthless worm and there's no way God can forgive me for all of these things. I'm going to hell and I know it. Oh well. Despair. The unforgivable sin. Because you can't be forgiven if you don't ask for forgiveness. So the saints have talked about these demons attacking you at death. In fact, this book that I brought, Thomas à Kempis, the author of Imitation of Christ, a lot of people know that we are publishing other titles by him and others that have never been put into English before. And this one, Meditations on Death, Preparing for Eternity, is this kind of amazing story of a man on his deathbed. And à Kempis creates a story where basically the Grim Reaper appears and is tempting this man towards despair at the moment of his death. And he also kind of shows he has insights of what hell is. He even talks about what hell smells like, which is kind of an amazing thing. Like, what do you mean? He just makes it so real, kind of like Dante did in the Inferno.
Spoiler alert, it doesn't smell good.
No, it doesn't smell good. It does not smell good at all. But, and then à Kempis leaves you hanging, not knowing whether the guy's ultimately saved or not, right? But I think that the demons attack, I know that the demons, if they can, they will attack you. They got one last chance to pull that soul down to hell. And parents, that's your kid. That's your little girl. That's your little boy. They're going to die. And this could happen to them. I'm not saying for certain that it happens to everybody, but so what ammo do you give your kid for this moment of death? And you have asked Mary throughout your life 100,000 times, 500,000 times, 1,000,000 times to be with you at the hour of your death. If you could leave your kid $1 million in inheritance, a yacht, a Porsche, a big house, or the habit of praying a daily rosary, that habit is worth more than Jeff Bezos's inheritance to his kids. I mean, it just is. Does he have kids? I don't know. But it's worth more than anything. And so please, parents, start praying the rosary every day with your kids. And when they grow up, encourage them to keep praying on their own. Pray it with their families. And so that's the best gift you can give your kids, is preparing them for death, because it's going to happen. Death and taxes, man. No way around it.
So in the 4 last things after death comes judgment. You paint a vivid image in the book about your kid in an orange jumpsuit at the judgment.
Yeah. I mean, I worked for a federal judge, and so we saw this. Like, one of the main things that federal judges do is they have federal sentencings, like hearings. And so sometimes they've been found guilty, but other times they have a
plea
deal or something, and they admit guilt or whatever, and they have to be sentenced. That's like a separate thing than their trial or whatever.
Right, after.
And so as a law clerk, I'm sitting up there with the judge, and you see these guys and gals come in these orange jumpsuits. They got chains around their wrist and they got chains between their feet. And usually their family, which is usually their mom and grandma, are sitting in the courtroom, and they're watching their little boy. They're watching their little boy shuffle out with these little baby steps, because the chains you can't take a big stride, little baby steps. That mom and grandma taught the kid to walk. They held their little hands. And that guy who's some drug dealing thug now, he was just an innocent little boy. He was just a cute little thing learning to walk, holding mom's hands. So, I would see these criminals being sentenced, and very often in my head, I was like, God, it was just not that many years ago. He was just an innocent little boy, and now he's being sentenced. And then the whole process of a sentencing in court, where you have a criminal history report that the judge has reviewed before. That's everything they've ever done wrong that they've been caught for. They have they get to confess. They get to plead for mercy. Sometimes their family or friends get to make a statement, pleading for mercy. Like, I see these things, and it makes me think about our eternal judgment, our private judgment that we'll have, that our kids will have. Again, you die before your kids, hopefully, and then you're witnessing their judgment one day.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying. And in this book, we actually have a section in here that cites to a great old tan book that's called
The 4 Last Things?
The 4 Last Things. It's called The 4 Last Things, right? Yeah, it's too obvious to remember. And this Father Martin von Cockham, and he provides different reasons that we should fear our judgment. And I actually think these are pretty good. This just kind of hones the mind. So just real quick. Number one, the soul fears judgment because the soul knows that her judge is omniscient. So the judge I worked for was not. Usually those guys committed a lot of crimes that the court didn't even know about. They probably, you probably just got busted for a handful of things. It wasn't in your criminal history report. But now this judge knows everything, every little sin. Nothing is hidden from the knowledge of God. He is omniscient. He knows everything. That's powerful. That should strike terror into us and to our children. Second, the judge is omnipotent, all-powerful, like all-powerful. Number three, the judge is not merely the most just, but the most strict. What does that mean? Well, he's also infinitely merciful. That's not to diminish that. But Christ talks about in the Gospels how every farthing will be paid. Like every little penny that's owed will be paid. Now, thank God for purgatory. That's not one of the four last things. That could be a whole nother show, but thank Almighty God that at our sentence we can get purgatory and have to, work off some of this debt that we have to our Lord. But everything's going to be paid for. And I don't really know. I always have to kind of make this disclaimer. I don't pretend to know, Tim, like exactly how Christ's suffering I know that he paid for our sins in one way, but we still have to pay for ours in another. I'm not pretending to understand all the intricacies of that. I'm really not a great theologian with that. But still, we need to go into this thinking we got to pay for our sins. That's what purgatory is. Number four, because the soul knows that God is not her judge alone, but is also her accuser. Now, imagine you're in a federal court and the judge and the prosecutor are the same person. Oh man, you're in trouble, right? So the judge isn't going to be sitting there just like listening to different sides, No. The judge is the accuser. That's a little scary, right? Number five, because the soul is aware that the sentence once uttered is irrevocable. There's no appeal. There's no appellate court. There's no Supreme Court. You're done. Once it's rendered, you're done. That's scary too. The most powerful reason of all why the soul fears to appear before the judgment seat is because she knows not what the sentence of the judge will be. So she has no idea what's going to happen. And we don't. We have all these kinds of opinions about how hard it is to get into heaven or how hard it is to get into hell. We have opinions about ourselves, about how good we are, how bad we are. But when that moment comes, we can have hope, we can love God, we can be humble, but we don't know. We don't know what the sentence is going to be. No one does. That's scary. So those are 6 reasons in this old tan book called The 4 Last Things that I put in my book, of course, because we need to think about that. And we need to think about it for ourselves. But for some reason, when we think about it ourselves, we don't take it quite as serious. But when you think about it for your kid, that kicks it into another gear. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Bearing responsibility for someone else's eternal soul.
Yeah. That's judgment, man. That's judgment. And I think it's helpful for parents. Again, it's not morbid, but it's recognizing that your kid is going to have a judgment and they're going to be judged. How are you preparing them now for that moment? It's not a question of if it happens. Your kid is going to be judged. And those 6 reasons for fear is really there. What are you going to do, mom and dad, today to prepare that kid for that judgment in 50 years, 70 years, 100 years? It's going to happen. And how are you preparing them today? I feel that kind of strongly. But.
So 4 last things: death, judgment, hell, and heaven. Hell. The quote from the book is interesting to me because of the concept of free will. God's infinite love does not force your child to love him. His love provides free will. We choose hell.
Yeah, a lot of church fathers and doctors have kind of talked about that. I mean, the whole concept of hell by an infinitely merciful God it's really kind of hard for us to grapple with. But I don't want to try to give a whole lecture here on what hell is and who in the world would choose hell. But I don't think it's necessarily, I think it's pretty clear that we don't have to actually sit down and say, I choose hell in order to go there. And I'll just say this, like, of all the heresies in the world, and there's a lot of them. There's one that I'm sympathetic towards. Note, sympathetic. I don't agree with it. And that's universalism. That's the belief that all people will be saved, or that hell will be annihilated at some point, or even that souls will just be annihilated. There's different kind of versions of universalism. And I'm tempted towards it because the infinite mercy of God seems incredible.
I think the soft side of everyone is tempted towards that.
Right. But the church has spoken clearly. Hell is eternal and people can go there. So I have to kind of accept that. I'm just saying if I ever had to be a heretic, which I don't, which is a stupid thing to say. I don't even know why I just said that. But like, it's the one heresy where I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish that was true. But that shows my finite mind. That shows I lack an understanding of true charity, of true justice, of truth. And in heaven, I maybe will understand it better. But I struggle. I really struggle to accept the doctrine of hell. I do. So I have to. It's more of a matter of faith for me. I have to accept. I do. I humbly submit to the church. But it's hard. It's hard because hell, once you meditate on it, it's awful. It's awful. And so I don't get kicks and giggles of like reading Dante anymore. Like I used to. And Dante's great. Read him. But it was almost kind of cool. There was almost an inordinate curiosity about what kind of sufferings were there. It's like why people watch horror movies or something. And like my dad, he's funny. He's just this old guy. And he's the most manly man. Like, there's nothing feminine about him. But in his old age, he just kind of sits up in the mountains. And whenever he watches TV, he watches Hallmark movies. And we just make fun of him. What are you doing watching He watched cowboy movies and Hallmark movies. But he's like, they're nice. They're happy endings and little cute little love stories. And they're usually very innocent and pure. And it's just, and he's just this big tough guy watching Hallmark movies. But I think that there's an evolution of the soul there where it's like, I'm no longer entertained by the grotesque. Now we have to investigate it and we have to recognize that hell is an eternal, true place with some physicality because bodies will be there. But, actually this is important for parents to remember, you need to really consider Halloween. Like there is something demonic in our culture's wholesale adoption of dark and grisly and evil like costumes and just having a tremendous amount of joy and satisfaction and fun in the grotesque. We turn demons into playthings, and you see these little kids dressed up like horrific creatures. It's meant to be, All Souls Day, where we celebrate, or we pray for souls waiting to get to heaven. So if your kids, if you're going to have any kind of Halloween, have your kids dress up like Mother Teresa, okay, or Joan of Arc, or, cowboys and Indians or something at the worst, right? But stop all this dark Halloween celebration and get that crap out of your yard that's showing skeletons and goblins and demons, and get that crap out of your yard. We are inviting demons into our culture through this. Halloween has gotten out of freaking control, and Catholic parents should not participate. You do not need to have all of this darkness in order to have fun on Halloween. So our kids dress up like saints, or the little kids dress up like a lion or animals, or tigers or bears, or just something innocent, nothing dark. I see these little tiny girls going around like 5 oh, this looks so cute. I dressed up my 5-year-old like a little devil with her little horns and a little tail and a pitchfork. Isn't that cute? No, it's freaking dark, man. What's wrong with you, mom and dad? God, it angers me. Like you're trivializing this concept of hell. You're taking the image of these creatures that reign in hell and try to pull us down, and you're dressing your kid up like that. I'm not a prude, man, but that stuff's got to change. Like our society's gone bonkers on this in the last 30 years. It's just another level, So, we got a couple great books on hell. The Dogma of Hell is a very powerful book, but I think the only thing I'll leave the parents on this is a healthy fear of hell is healthy. and to not talk about it is a neglect. Just like not warning your teenagers about going down dark alleyways, that is just neglectful parenting. You have to talk to your kids about the realities of hell. I'm sorry that it's a scary reality. Well, so is pornography, so is human trafficking, so is rape, so is drugs, so are gangs. You got to talk to your kids about those. What, you're going to avoid those because they're unpleasant? You need to talk to your kids about hell. It's real.
The quote from the book is, "A healthy fear of Satan and his dominion is a grace from God, but ultimately the greater fear should be the loss of heaven."
Do you want to bring order and clarity back into your family life? Hey, I got 16 kids and I understand better than anyone we need to do that. So my wife and I, Ashley, we developed a 6-part family management system to do just that. And it's based on concrete business tools and principles that you can apply in the day-to-day running of your household. So please come to wellorderedfamily.com, check out our tools, our books, and most importantly, our one-on-one coaching so that we can work directly with you and customize a program to help your family get to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into heaven, because the point here is not to dwell on hell. Clearly, that's not the purpose. You have to mention it. And I think saints have been very clear in the tradition that fear of hell is sufficient to keep us out of there. Like, being sorry for your sins because of fear of hell, I think that's sufficient. I think that works, but it is the bare minimum. We need to confess our sins. Actually, the act of contrition. Every time I say it in confession, I really think about this. It's like the alphabet. I can't start in the middle. You know what I mean? Like I have to actually
at the very beginning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh my God, I'm sorry for having firmly resolved to help you here. Oh my God, I'm heartily sorry for having offended thee. I attest all my sins because of your just punishment, but most of all, not because of I'm going to go to hell, but most of all, because I have offended you, my God, who are all good and deserving of all my love. But most of all, because I have offended you, my God. So when you say the act of contrition and confession, don't just you can rattle it off pretty quick, but you need to say, but most of all, emphasize that. But most of all. So we need to teach our kids not just to avoid hell, but to strive for heaven. The saints did not become saints simply by trying to stop being bad. Any more than a great athlete becomes a great athlete by just trying to not lose the game. Right. I hate teams that just play not to lose. You know what I mean?
How about coaches?
Oh, it drives you crazy.
Feel it. They're just scared.
You can totally see they're scared. One of the reasons I love the Eagles, that we just had the Super Bowl, is if it's 4th and 3, they go for it every time.
Yeah, the
you know
Lions
what I'm saying?
were like that. Yeah. Well, that's a new trend in the NFL anyway. Just to get sportsy real quick. They used to be super conservative and way too much. And now the trend has gone the other way to be
it gets the team pumped up. It gets the fans pumped up.
It's a mindset thing.
And I don't know how many times they get it, but there's probably is. I bet you it works in their favor. Net.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the unintended consequence, even if you don't get it, your team has confidence. They know you have confidence in them. Yeah, I love coaching kids from the confidence standpoint, right?
So Bernard of Clairvaux said something just incredibly beautiful, and I hope parents take this to heart. He says, even the worst of sinners, in his darkest hour of sin, he should not only have hope that he can stop sinning and barely get out of hell. Even in his darkest moment of sin, he should have the hope that he can experience a full and complete mystical union with God.
Well, that's Saint Dismas, right?
Yeah. The good thief on the cross. By the way, the first canonized saint.
Right. Crazy, right?
Isn't that wonderful?
That's amazing.
And so, So I think that we need to train our children in the way we talk and the way we act and the way we make a representative of a faithful Christian in front of them. A picture's worth 1,000 words. We know that. Is we have to show them that we are striving for heaven like an athlete. Actually, the ascetical life comes from the Greek word for athlete. when the people talk about an ascetic, that's like the Desert Fathers. It was the same word for athlete. No, I'm serious. And it's really cool because we have to strive for heaven like an athlete is striving for perfection, not just playing defense to stay out of hell. So teach your kids when they're going to confession. Parents have to teach their kids this. You have to train them like athletes. When we're trying to get our kids to go to confession, by the way, we're teaching ourselves by doing this, right?
Sure.
Don't just get your kids to confess sins of commission. I did this wrong. I was nasty to my brother. I was nasty to my sister. I told a little white lie. I didn't do my chores. Okay, that's fine. Good. Teach them from the youngest age, from their first confession, to learn to think about their sins of omission. Like that's when it gets real. You're teaching them to confess the things that they failed to do versus the things wrong that they did. When you do that, you start feeling, the result of it is you start feeling, I didn't strive for heaven. I didn't strive for heaven. You need to train your children to think about sins of omission because that's the only way they're going to realize I could have done so much more. I could have, my greatest failing is in what I failed to try to accomplish. And if you want a saint, they have to learn how to really strive or stretch hard and do things that are not always required. Do your duty. That's good. But that's not enough. Duty's one thing. Like you can do your duty towards your wife and, pay the bills and help out around the house a little bit. Or are you striving to be the perfect spouse, loving her for, all the right reasons, this as much as possible, suffering with her voluntarily, going above and beyond the call of duty. Like that's the phrase, go above and beyond the call of duty. That's why people get, awards in the military. That's why marriages work really well. And guess what? That's why your kids can become a saint is when they start really striving for heaven in a way that most people don't ever even think about it. So, but there's an important thing here as we kind of begin to wrap up on heaven because I know our time's kind of ticking away.
Metaphorically or just for the podcast?
Both.
Gotcha.
Both. But a book we have, The Glories of Heaven, something that parents should read this book. I'm not sitting here trying to hawk books. It's just Tan publishes this stuff. I mean, it's the best articulation of this. The Glories of Heaven. You want to play some offense? You want to, and actually go back earlier, like we love the little legs and the little arms and the little hands and little feet. We do all these things to protect the body. Why? Because it'll be glorified. This book by St. Anselm, never before in English, it's about what the glorified body is going to be like. We don't think about this enough. What is this little body? Okay, 10 trillion. Kevin, can you pull up the that little page?
Numbers. We're talking
numbers. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So glorified body. Okay, your little kid. Like we think about million's a big number. I want to be a millionaire, right? Billion, trillion's the big one. Like $1 trillion deficit. Like that's what we got. $30 trillion deficit now. Whatever it is, I lost count. I stopped paying attention. It's so big.
Right.
But trillion's the big number.
It's number 3 on this list.
It's number 3 on a huge list. Trillion. Mom and Dad, 1 trillion years from now is nothing. Trillions are nothing, right? Nothing. You got septillion, octillion. Septillion's like I thought that was like a character in Star Trek. A septillion.
A dinosaur.
Like, yeah. All these words you've never even heard of. Decillion. I can't even read some of these things. Octocillion. Novendecillion. I don't even know what these words mean. You go all the way down, go way down. And now you're into words none of us have ever heard, right? So if you get like what is that? How do you even say that word?
Millennialian?
Millennialian. I don't even know what it means.
It's 1,000 quingentillion.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
Obviously.
Thanks for clarifying that. Trillion's nothing. And then you get down to Google. Somewhere below this is Google. And so now we're in the Google, which is everyone knows that word. And you have Google upon Google upon Google and all of these crazy numbers. Like I can't even pronounce it. A 10 duotrigantillion.
Sure.
I mean, that's like something, that sounds like when my kids are making up a number. That's what they say.
Absolutely.
You got PhD scientists that make up these numbers and they're laughing at us because they're just gobbledygooking words.
But then look how many it is.
I know. And then you get this Googleplex, which is some multiple of Google's, right?
It looks like it's 10 to the 10th power to the 100th power.
Yeah, it's just staggering. And there's even a bigger number than this. Kevin, what was that down there? You go down all the way down.
Graham.
Graham's number. Like Graham came up with a number. And I don't even know how he keeps doing it, but I want to.
He didn't get out much.
So yeah, he did not get out. So I think we could just say Graham's number plus 1 is Conor's number.
Gotcha.
I think we should. I want to be on the Wikipedia page, say Conor's number. Conor's number. I show that when I give talks to parents. I show that because those numbers are real. Those are real things, and you need to think about your kid's soul, not in terms of hundreds or thousands of years or millions of years. Trillions, nothing. These Google numbers, you need to think about your kid as Googleplex. They're going to live Googleplex years. The body, their physical body is going to watch the sun turn to dust. They're going to see the whole Milky Way turn to a ball of ash. They're going to see it with their own eyes because we're going to have glorified eyes. Your kid, your little boy, little girl, he's going to have glorified arms, glorified legs, glorified eyes, and he's going to see this universe turn to nothingness. And that might be in 10 trillion years. It might be in 1,000. It might be tomorrow. I don't know. Or it could be in Googleplex times Google. It could be Graham's years, whatever the heck that means. I don't even know what it means. We need to think about this because eternity, Graham's number is nothing to eternity. Googleplex is nothing to eternity. It goes on and on and on. If we could comprehend that for just a few seconds, it would radically alter the way we live. And we don't. We don't think because it's too big for our brain. We can't handle it
already just thinking about it.
We can't think about it. We can sort of think about trillions because at least we talk about that in terms of trillions of dollars. Elon Musk is worth X trillions of dollars. We can sort of think about that. These other numbers, there's only a couple people in the world that even know what they mean. And they're all nothing. They're dust. They're dirt compared to eternity. Googleplex is 1 grain of sand in the universe compared to eternity. We have to try with our finite, limited minds to think that our children, our little girls, little boys are going to live that long. And what we're doing in this fraction of time is preparing them for their death and their judgment so they don't go to hell and they have eternity to have this glorified body. Now, again, back to this book. I'm sorry I'm all over the place, but this book, Glories of Heaven, you can read it in 30 minutes. But here's why I like it, because Anselm, long time ago, he is speculating about what the body will be like in heaven. And it's remarkable. First of all, it's beautiful. Every time I talk, I wonder, after I talk, I end up saying, okay, well, if there was like one thing I wanted people to get, and this is it. If you've made it this long, this is it. And I might have to say it a couple times to get it right because I haven't said it enough to remember it. Your beauty here in this life is a gift. There's people who are just beautiful. Your beauty in this life is a gift. Your beauty in the next is a reward. Your beauty in this life is a gift. Your beauty in the next life is a reward. The more beautiful, the more holy your soul is now. The more holy your kid's soul is now, the more beautiful his glorified body will be. And that was news to me. Like, I didn't really understand that. I just kind of thought everyone had a glorified body. No, we're going to be in heaven. And just like today, we look around and we say, wow, she's beautiful. He's kind of a good looking human being. Like, we have this sense of like who's beautiful, who's not. Same thing's going to be in heaven, guys. We're going to be looking around in heaven saying, look how beautiful that person is. Look, that person's even more beautiful. And that is going to be a result. Their physical beauty, their bodily beauty in heaven is going to be directly proportionate to how holy they were in this life. We are wasting our time. We are screwing around with our eternal physical looks for all of eternity. And we spend all this stupid time at the gym, doing curls or something stupid to just try to increase our biceps by fractions of an inch over a long period of time. when we could be on our knees in adoration, and so we'd be more beautiful for eternity. Eternity. Google times Google times Google. So the physical body is going to be directly proportionate to how we lived our lives here in this life. That's kind of an amazing thing.
Well, that helps me in my mind imagine the image. It helps crystallize for me the image of trying, what will my kids look like if I am ever so lucky, fortunate to see them in heaven?
Yeah.
Right.
What are they going to look like?
How can I help them get to that glorified body?
Yeah. No, imagine seeing your kids in heaven and like you see this really, truly beautiful human being that looks powerful, that looks brilliant, that's just glowing. And then you're like, something looks familiar about him. And then you realize slowly, wait a minute, is that my son? Is that my son? That's the reward. That's the reward for mom and dad, A few other things I just want to rattle off. The velocity of glorified bodies. I think that's really cool. St. Anselm talked about we're going to be able to fly like angels throughout outer space. It's like, phew, imagine being able to go to the edge of the universe, which I think I saw the other day is 65 billion light years away from where we are. It's like 65 billion. That's how long it would take light to get to the edge of the observable universe, 65 billion light years, okay? That's a long damn time. And the glorified body is going to be able to go and get to the edge of the universe and come back. That's how like patron saints and stuff are able to pop in and out of heaven and help us, the velocity. Something we don't really think about. But yeah, we're going to have velocity. We're going to have speed. The immensity of their strength, okay? A glorified body is going to have unlimited strength. We're going to be able to pick up the Grand Canyon. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but immeasurable strength compared to what we have. Again, that's going to be, how strong is our soul now? How strong is our virtue? How strong is our holiness? How strong is our humility and our charity? Well, that's going to transfer into physical strength down the road. It's an amazing concept. It goes on, but wonderful friendships. We think we have good friendships now. No, you're going to have friendships that you've never imagined, and they're going to last for eternity. He has a whole chapter here on concord. So like concord is like, think about how much conflict we have in this life. So even if our best friends, our spouses, whoever it is, we have little conflicts. We're not in perfect agreement, and there's little tensions everywhere. I mean, I live my life with just like little tensions. But in heaven, it's all gone. And everybody you're with, you have complete agreement because you have perfect unity, perfect alignment with them about everything. No more disputing politics, no more disputing theology, no more disputing biblical interpretation, no more debate about, rivalries in your favorite teams. Like, if you have a neighbor in heaven, he's a perfect neighbor and you get along perfectly. It's incredible to have perfect concord, So I could go on, but it's worth mom and dad thinking about what is the glorified body of my kid going to be like for all eternity, which is Google times Google times Google times Google going on for Google. It's just I like thinking about those numbers. We have to put these big concepts like eternity into some language that we're able to understand to some extent. And parents need to take this very seriously. But again, if there is anything you take from this, it's that death, judgment, heaven, hell. I mean, the whole purpose is to get that glorified body. And the beauty in this life is a gift. And the beauty of your little one's body in the next life is a reward. I think parents need to remember that.
I think you just reverse engineered parenting.
Good. Trying my best, bud.